Ladies and gentlemen, there's something sacred about the world at 4 a.m. It's quiet, still, empty, and yet full of potential. Most people are still asleep. But if you're awake, truly awake, you've already chosen to separate yourself from the ordinary. And that one choice, done consistently, will begin to shape everything in your life. Today, I want to show you why waking up at 4 a.m. isn't just a productivity hack. It's a life shift. Not because it's magical, but because who you become in the process changes everything. Let's explore 6 reasons why this one discipline can radically transform your mindset, your output, and your purpose. Imagine waking up in the quiet stillness of 4 a.m. The world is asleep. There are no pings from your phone, no one calling your name, no obligations pulling you in 100 directions. There is only you, and for the first time, in perhaps days, weeks, or even months, you've created space before the world has a chance to take it from you. We live in a culture obsessed with speed, productivity, and hustle. By 8 a.m., most people are already reacting, answering messages, checking the news, getting kids ready, jumping into Zoom meetings, and diving headfirst into their to-do lists. But that's the problem. We become so conditioned to respond, we've forgotten how to lead our own lives. Waking up at 4 a.m. is not just about rising early, it's about reclaiming your agency. It's about choosing to lead the day instead of following its chaos. In that sacred window of silence, you create space. And in that space, you meet yourself again. Think about it. When was the last time you truly thought without interruption? No background noise, no notifications, no demands, just you in your mind allowed to wander, reflect, question, and dream. We often talk about the need for clarity, for inspiration, for focus, but how can we expect to find any of it in a world designed to distract us at every turn? The truth is, those things don't come from apps, meetings, or strategy sessions. They come from silence, from solitude, from space. A CEO I spoke with not long ago shared something I'll never forget. He told me that his most powerful business decisions that shaped the direction of his company and impacted thousands of lives, were never made in a boardroom. They were made between 4 and 6 a.m., sitting alone on his balcony with a hot cup of coffee and a blank notepad. That time, he said, is when the noise of the world fades and the deeper questions can surface. What am I building? Why does it matter? Who am I becoming in the process? It's not about productivity, it's about purpose. It's about hearing the quiet voice beneath all the noise that asks, is this the life I want to lead? You see, clarity doesn't scream, it whispers. And unless you create the stillness to hear it, you'll miss it. Most people never realize that their best ideas, their most courageous decisions, and their most authentic selves are buried under layers of distraction. They wait for the weekend, the vacation, the retirement to finally breathe. But by then, life has passed them by. The space you crave won't appear by accident. You have to carve it out. You have to defend it. And the easiest way to do that? Wake up before the world asks anything of you. There's something profoundly powerful about starting your day before the sun. It's symbolic. It says, I choose to rise. I choose to begin, not because I have to, but because I want to. That's the kind of life that doesn't just happen to you. It's a life you build on purpose. When you begin your day from a place of intention, everything else shifts. You're not just reacting, you're creating. You're not just surviving, you're designing. And that difference can change everything. I've met artists, entrepreneurs, athletes, parents, and students who all share the same story. They were burned out, overwhelmed, stuck in cycles they couldn't break. Until they made one small but radical change. They woke up early. They started the day with themselves instead of everyone else. They journaled, they meditated, they planned, they prayed, they sat in silence. And from that simple habit, everything started to change. Not because 4 a.m. holds magical powers, but because they created the space to remember who they were and what they were here to do. The world we live in rewards noise, but greatness is born in silence. Innovation doesn't come when you're drowning in emails. Vision doesn't strike when you're sprinting through your schedule. You need stillness. You need space. And if you don't make it, the world will take it from you. You can't build a remarkable life by accident. You build it by starting each day on purpose, by asking yourself not just, what do I have to do today, but who do I want to be today? That question, asked daily in the quiet of the early morning, becomes your compass. And it's a compass that can guide you to places no calendar ever could. Most people live their lives in response to the world, but the people who change the world, they live in response to their inner voice. They lead from within. And that leadership begins not with a strategy session or a quarterly plan. It begins in the silence before dawn. 4 a.m. isn't about being a morning person. It's about being a purpose-driven person. It's about showing up for your life before it starts showing up for you. Because when you own your morning, you begin to own your life. And when the rest of the world wakes up, you're not scrambling to keep up. You're ahead, focused, grounded. You've already met the most important person you'll talk to all day, yourself. You've already asked the most important questions, set the most important intentions, made the most important decisions, not because someone told you to, but because you chose to. In a world that's always demanding more of you, the most radical thing you can do is create space. Not just once, but every day. Before the emails, before the traffic, before the meetings, before the scroll. Create space before the world demands it. That's where your power lives. That's where your clarity hides. And that's where your life begins. Most people misunderstand discipline. They imagine it as restriction, as self-denial, as some kind of internal punishment doled out by the version of ourselves that's always trying to play the role of the strict parent. But discipline, when truly understood, is the opposite of punishment. It's the birthplace of freedom. Freedom to show up, to follow through, to create, to lead, to live fully. And not just occasionally, not just when it's easy, but consistently. That's where the power lies. Waking up at 4 a.m. is not a goal. It's not a trophy. It's not even about the time. It's a mirror that reflects the kind of person you are becoming. Because to rise while the rest of the world sleeps means you've made a choice, not just to change your routine, but to change your identity. It means you've stopped negotiating with comfort and started aligning yourself with commitment. At 4 a.m., the world is quiet. There are no distractions, no emails, no expectations, just you. You and your promises, you and your doubts, you and your standards. And in that stillness, something transformative happens. You start to feel your own potential, not in a grand motivational poster kind of way, but in a raw, grounded, deeply personal way. It's not hype, it's habit. It's not adrenaline, it's alignment. Discipline is not something you summon when you feel strong. It's what shows up when you feel weak. It's what carries you when motivation disappears. And motivation will disappear. That's its nature. It's unreliable. It fluctuates. But discipline is a decision you make once and then you honor it again and again and again until it stops being something you do and starts becoming who you are. When you rise at 4 a.m. because you said you would, not because your bed felt uncomfortable, not because your schedule demanded it, but simply because your word matters, you begin to rebuild the most important relationship in your life, the one with yourself. And when you trust yourself at that level, you show up differently everywhere else. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Your actions already speak. Your presence already declares who you are. It leaks into your fitness, not because you're chasing aesthetics, but because your body becomes a reflection of your internal structure. It leaks into your relationships, not because you become more likable, but because you become more reliable. People begin to count on you because you've learned how to count on yourself. And in your work, it becomes the silent edge. While others scramble for hacks and shortcuts, you're showing up every day, consistently, regardless of how you feel. And over time, that becomes unstoppable. Greatness was never reserved for the most talented. It's reserved for the most disciplined. The ones who are willing to do what's necessary, even when it's not convenient. Because convenience is the enemy of growth. It tempts you with ease, it seduces you with comfort, but it robs you of transformation. You don't wake up inspired every day, but you wake up anyway. You don't always feel powerful, but you move forward anyway. You know, that greatness is not built in moments of ease. It's forged in moments of effort. Discipline isn't glamorous. No one claps for you at 4 a.m. There's no audience, no applause, no external reward. And that's exactly why it works. Because it's in those moments, those quiet, unseen, uncelebrated choices, that your identity begins to shift. You're no longer someone who tries to be disciplined. You are disciplined. You don't just act with integrity, you are integrity. And when your identity starts aligning with the habits you've chosen, change becomes inevitable. It's not always loud, it's not always pretty, but it's always powerful. We live in a world that celebrates outcomes, but what really matters is the process, the reps, the early alarms, the small, consistent decisions that no one sees. Everyone wants to shine on the stage, but few are willing to practice in the dark. Yet the dark is where confidence is born. Confidence doesn't come from success, it comes from evidence. The evidence that you said you would and you did over and over. When it was hard, when it was boring, when it didn't feel worth it, you still showed up. And slowly your life begins to change, not because of one giant leap, but because of thousands of tiny, quiet steps. You become more resilient, not because you avoid pain, but because you've learned how to push through it. You become more focused, not because life gets easier, but because your distractions lose their power. You become more confident, not because you fake it, but because you've earned it. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you cast a vote for the kind of person you want to become, and enough votes cast over time begin to define you. So if you're waking up at 4 a.m., do it not for the productivity, not for the hustle, not even for the results. Do it because of who you have to become in order to keep that promise to yourself. Do it because that version of you, the one who honors their word, the one who shows up without needing a cheerleader, the one who rises before the world starts demanding from you, is the version that can handle anything. Discipline is how we practice becoming that person. Not once, not occasionally, but every single day. That's how identity's built. By the time the world rubs the sleep from its eyes, you've already aligned your mind, body, and spirit. While others are tangled in their blankets, wrestling with alarms and excuses, you're in motion. Not rushing, moving with intention, not reacting, creating. This is more than productivity, it's presence. It's a declaration to yourself and the world, I'm in charge of how this day begins. There's a sacred stillness in those early hours, a silence that doesn't just surround you, it supports you. In that quiet, there are no demands, no emails, no noise. Only choice. You can choose to breathe, to stretch, to think. You can hear your own thoughts before they're drowned out by the needs of others. And that's the moment momentum is born. Not when the to-do list starts, but when you start being before you start doing. Momentum isn't about speed, it's about alignment. When you rise before the sun, you give yourself the space to set your emotional compass. You decide how you want to feel, what kind of energy you want to carry, and how you'll respond to the inevitable friction of life. Most people stumble into their day already behind, checking notifications before brushing their teeth, reacting to a world they haven't even mentally entered. But you've already arrived, you've already owned your morning, and that ownership radiates. Behavioral scientists talk about the fresh start effect, the psychological power of a new beginning. Think about the energy we feel on New Year's Day, on birthdays, or the first day of school. Those are moments where we feel invited to change, to begin again. But what if that opportunity wasn't once a year? What if it happened every morning? That's the power of waking up early. It gives you a clean slate, a reset, a chance to take the pen and write the story of today with clarity and conviction. And here's the secret. The momentum you build before the world wakes up doesn't stay in the morning. It compounds, it spills over into how you speak in meetings, how you show up for your relationships, how you handle stress. You've already had a win, you've already made progress. That creates a sense of internal credibility. You trust yourself. You showed up when it was hard. You followed through when no one was watching. That kind of integrity fuels a confidence that doesn't shout, it shows. And that confidence, it's contagious. People feel it. They don't know why, but they listen more when you talk. They lean in a little closer because you're not carrying the weight of procrastination or self-doubt. You're carrying purpose, and purpose has a posture. Let's be honest. Waking up early isn't easy. It's not glamorous. There's no audience, no applause. But that's why it matters. Because greatness is rarely built in front of a crowd. It's built in those unseen moments when you choose discipline over comfort, when you choose growth over ease. You don't rise early because you have to. You rise because you're becoming someone who values preparation over panic, someone who builds their foundation before the storm, someone who leads themselves before they ever try to lead others. Look at the most grounded, centered people you admire. Their strength doesn't come from chance. It comes from rhythm, from rituals that ground them in who they are, from quiet victories that no one sees but change everything. When you win the morning, you don't just win the day, you win trust with yourself. You prove again and again that you are capable of more than most are willing to try. And it's not about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than who you were yesterday. It's about creating a small, private victory that no one can take from you. Because when you've already had that time to read, reflect, breathe, and move, then life doesn't throw you off. It merely adds texture. You don't chase balance, you build it before the world has a chance to take it away. Momentum is not just a motivational concept. It's a biological one. Your body learns your rhythm. Your brain wires itself to expect growth in the morning. The more consistently you do this, the easier it becomes. What felt like sacrifice becomes sanctuary. What felt like early becomes essential. And that's when transformation begins, not in giant leaps, but in small, consistent moments of showing up when it would be easier to stay in bed. And you don't have to do it perfectly. Some days the workout is shorter, the journal entries are messy, the meditation drifts, but that's okay because it's not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about keeping your promises to yourself. It's about saying, I matter enough to start my day with me. And yes, the world may never see what you did at 4 a.m. They may never know about the sweat, the silence, the self-talk, but you will. And you'll walk into the day not needing the world to validate you because you've already validated yourself. That's the gift of momentum. It's not just about getting ahead. It's about starting centered. And when you do that day after day, something beautiful happens. You stop living life on defense. You stop playing catch up. You start creating. You start leading. You start becoming. And that version of you, the one who shows up before the world even opens its eyes, isn't waiting for motivation. They've already started moving. And once you're in motion, everything gets easier, not because the world changed, but because you did. Time is not just a resource. It is the only one we cannot replenish. We can lose money and make more. We can lose possessions and replace them. But once time slips through our fingers, it is gone forever. And yet, it's the one thing we treat the most carelessly. We waste it in moments of distraction, give it away to things that don't fulfill us, and spend it on obligations we never chose. Most people move through life reacting, pulled from one demand to the next, from one notification to another. They let time happen to them instead of deciding what to do with it. But the moment you decide to wake up early, not because you have to, but because you choose to, is the moment you take back authorship of your time. There is something sacred about the hours before the world begins to stir, when everything is still and there's no pressure to perform, no emails to respond to, no expectations to meet. It's in that space where intentionality is born. Waking up at 4:30 in the morning isn't about proving how tough you are. It's about being clear on what matters to you. You begin to design your life around your values instead of your circumstances. You stop waiting for the perfect time and start carving time out of what you already have. That is how transformation begins. I once worked with Maya, a single mother who was juggling a full-time job, 2 kids, and a dream she'd almost forgotten she had. Every day, she came home exhausted and frustrated, too tired to work on the business plan she scribbled down years ago. When I asked her when she felt most in control, she laughed and said, "Never." But what we uncovered was this: her chaos wasn't just about her schedule. It was about how she related to time. She believed she had none, but belief is a powerful thing. It can be a prison or a doorway. And for Maya, once that belief shifted, so did her entire rhythm. She began waking up at 4:30 a.m., not because it was easy, but because it was the only space in her life that felt like hers. She used the first 20 minutes to read something that inspired her. Then she would sit with her notebook, working on her business plan bit by bit. It wasn't grand or flashy, it was consistent. And what started as 20 minutes became 40. What was once a scribbled idea became a registered business. And 6 months later, she had a product on the market and 10 paying clients. She didn't magically get more hours in her day. She just stopped wasting the ones she had. She stopped treating time as something to survive and started treating it as something to shape. That's what waking up early does. It turns you into an architect. Suddenly, your evenings become intentional because you want your mornings to count. You start saying no to late night distractions because they steal from your purpose. You begin to guard your energy not out of selfishness, but because you finally know what it's worth. You begin to notice which habits fuel your mission and which ones drain it. You realize that discipline is not a punishment, it's a declaration. It says, I know where I'm going, and I'm not going to let comfort steal it from me. It's not just about what you do in those early hours. It's about who you become in the process. Someone who shows up, someone who chooses, someone who refuses to be at the mercy of the day. Think about the difference between starting your morning reacting to a blaring alarm, rushing through breakfast, scrolling through social media and being late to a meeting, versus waking up with clarity, moving with purpose, and beginning the day with a sense of ownership. One puts you on defense, the other puts you in command. And it's not just about productivity, it's about peace. When you have space in your morning, you create space in your mind. You have time to think, reflect, set your tone. You're not chasing your day, you're leading it. That shift alone can ripple into every corner of your life. Your relationships improve because you're not always anxious and reactive. Your work improves because you're focused and grounded. Your health improves because you're not running on adrenaline and stress. But most importantly, your self-worth improves because you start to believe that you deserve to live on purpose, not by default. Those people think that the problem is time, but the real issue is alignment. When your time isn't aligned with your values, you will always feel drained. But when you align your schedule with what truly matters to you, even the most ordinary moments become meaningful. That's the gift of early mornings. They hold up a mirror to your life and ask, are you living it on purpose or on autopilot? Choosing to wake up early is not about perfection. It's about intention. It's a small, powerful rebellion against a world that tells you to be constantly available, constantly reacting, constantly chasing. It's a quiet declaration that your life is yours to lead, that you get to choose what matters, that you're not too busy, you just haven't prioritized yet. And that's where the real power lies, not in the clock, but in the choice. Because time is not just what's on your calendar. Time is how you show love. Time is how you show commitment. Time is how you say yes to yourself. And when you start giving yourself those early hours, those quiet, uninterrupted, sacred hours, you're not just getting more done. You're becoming someone who is no longer at the mercy of the day, but someone who leads it, someone who doesn't just live time, but shapes it. You become the architect of your time. And when that happens, your entire life begins to reflect it. At some point, we all have to face the question we've been avoiding. Who are we when no one's watching? Not the version we post online, not the person shaped by expectations or obligations, but the raw, unfiltered self, free from noise, free from judgment. That's the person you meet in solitude. And waking up at 4 a.m. isn't about productivity or hustle culture. It's about choosing to be alone, not because the world demanded it, but because you need to hear yourself think. Because before the world begins to place its demands on you, you need a moment to just be. In today's world, we've confused constant connection with companionship. We've replaced reflection with reaction, notifications, timelines, content, every second filled with something that keeps us outside of ourselves. But there's a sacredness in solitude that no feed can replicate. It's not loneliness, it's not isolation, it's intimacy with your own spirit. And that's a relationship too many of us have abandoned. When you're alone in those early hours, there's no performance. There's no need to be interesting, to be liked, to be understood. There's only the quiet. And in that quiet, you begin to uncover truths buried beneath years of distraction. You start to hear your own voice again. The one that used to dream without limits. The one that once believed it was worthy even before the world tried to convince you otherwise. Think about how rare that is. Most of us go days, even weeks, without a single moment of true silence. We avoid it like a mirror we don't want to look into. But it's only in silence that you confront the deeper questions, the ones that actually shape the direction of your life. What do I want? Who am I becoming? What's still hurting? What have I sacrificed for approval? Solitude is not a place you escape to, it's a place you return to, it's home. And when you start your day from that place, you build a foundation that's real. You begin your day not from a to-do list, but from self-awareness. You're no longer reacting to the world, you're responding with intention. That's the power of tapping into solitude. Look at the people who changed the world. Leaders, artists, visionaries, they all had something in common. They weren't afraid to be alone. Benjamin Franklin used his mornings for reflection and clarity. Toni Morrison wrote before dawn because that was the only time the world was quiet enough to let the words come. Steve Jobs took long, silent walks to make the most important decisions of his life. They didn't seek solitude because it made them more productive. They did it because it made them more them. When you spend time in solitude, you begin to understand your fears, not from a place of anxiety, but from a place of curiosity. You start asking, what am I really afraid of? Failure? Or being seen trying and not being enough? Rejection? Or the possibility that someone sees the real me and walks away? Those questions don't have quick answers. But in the quiet, you stop being afraid of the asking. The early hours don't just give you stillness, they give you sovereignty. That moment before the rest of the world demands your energy is when you reclaim it. And when you meet yourself in that space, without filters, without noise, you're reminded that the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship in your life. Because here's the truth. You can't create from chaos. You can't lead if you don't know where you're going. You can't love deeply if you don't even know what you need. That level of clarity, of grounding, only comes when you pause long enough to hear what's been buried underneath the busyness. And the reason most people never find that clarity isn't because they're not smart or talented. It's because they're never quiet enough for long enough. You can't outsource this work. No podcast, no TED Talk, no book will ever replace the wisdom you find when you sit with yourself. When you sit with your regret, your gratitude, your guilt, your longing, when you stop numbing and start listening. That's not easy work, but it's the kind of work that transforms you. The world wants your attention every minute. It profits off your distraction, but attention is a currency. And when you invest it in yourself, your soul, your purpose, your truth, the returns are exponential. Confidence, clarity, courage. They don't come from consumption, they come from communion with yourself. In solitude, you begin to remember what really matters. You strip away the comparison, the chasing, the proving, and you come back to presence, to enoughness, to being, not just doing. And from that place, you stop measuring your life in likes and followers and start measuring it in moments that moved you, lessons that shaped you, choices that align with your values. So no, solitude isn't isolation. Isolation is what happens when you feel alone, even in a crowd. Solitude is what happens when you feel connected, even in your aloneness. It's the difference between emptiness and fullness, between silence and stillness, between being lost and being grounded. You don't need more followers. You need more mornings with yourself. You don't need more opinions. You need more truth, your truth. And the only way to access it is by choosing to meet yourself when no one else is around, when the sun hasn't risen yet, when the world hasn't found you yet, when you can be fully, unapologetically, entirely you. That's why waking up at 4 a.m. matters, not because it makes you more productive, but because it makes you more present, more aligned, more you. And when you start your day that way, anchored in solitude, guided by truth, there's nothing the world can throw at you that you can't face. Because you're not reacting from noise anymore. You're responding from wisdom. And wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers. You just have to be still enough to hear it. Most people think waking up early is about squeezing out extra hours from the day, checking off more boxes, getting ahead in the rat race. But it's not about that, not really. Waking up early is about trust. Trust in yourself. It's about making a quiet commitment to rise before the world expects anything of you, and then showing up for that commitment again and again. When your alarm goes off at 4 or 5 a.m., no one's watching. No one's applauding. There are no spectators. It's just you, your intention, and the opportunity to either honor it or break it. At that moment, that's where integrity is built. Not in the big speeches, not in the public wins, but in the tiny, silent moments where no one is keeping score except you. It's easy to overlook the weight of these moments, but they form the backbone of your identity. Because if you can keep the promise to wake up early, a promise that brings no instant gratification, no immediate reward, what else are you capable of? Maybe you've been sitting on a dream for years. A book you said you'd write, a business you said you'd launch, A conversation you promised you'd have with someone you heard. Maybe you keep saying, when I have time. But time isn't something you find, it's something you create. Waking up early isn't just about getting a head start, it's about building evidence. Evidence that you're the kind of person who follows through, that you can do uncomfortable things, that when something matters to you, you don't wait for the perfect time, you make the time. And that evidence stacks. Each early morning becomes a vote for the person you're becoming, one who doesn't flinch in the face of discomfort, one who takes ownership of their time, their actions, their growth. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone trying to change, but as someone who is changing. And once you start to believe that about yourself, it gets harder to break promises, not easier. Because now breaking them costs you something, not just sleep, not just time, but integrity. That's the real shift. Waking up early is just the trigger. What you're really doing is strengthening your own moral muscle. You're practicing the art of self-leadership. And self-leadership is the root of every other kind of leadership. You can't lead a team, a business, a family, if you can't first lead yourself. And you can't lead yourself without trust. Trust that you'll do what you say you'll do. Trust that you'll show up when it's hard. Trust that you'll keep walking even when no one's clapping. The people we admire most, the ones who lead with authenticity, who walk with quiet strength, they don't become that way by accident. They've trained in the dark. They've cultivated inner discipline long before the world recognized it. And more often than not, it starts in moments just like this, when the alarm rings and there's a choice to be made. Will I honor the promise I made to myself last night? Or will I abandon it for the comfort of my pillow? That decision, repeated over time, becomes a pattern, and that pattern becomes character. You can't fake character. You can't shortcut integrity. You have to earn it. And the earning begins in the smallest acts. Waking up early is just one of them. But it's powerful because it's hard. And in doing hard things, especially the ones that no one else will know about, we become someone worth believing in. And when you become someone worth believing in, you stop waiting, you stop asking for permission to start the thing, to write the first chapter, to pitch the idea, to mend the broken relationship, because you've already proven to yourself that you can act without applause, that you can move without external motivation, that you can lead without a map. Most people don't lack motivation, they lack belief. They haven't given themselves enough proof that they can be counted on. They've broken too many of their own promises, and now their self-trust is bankrupt. That's what early rising begins to heal. You take back control, one small promise at a time. You show yourself, I can do this. I do follow through. I am capable. And when that realization lands, not in your head, but deep in your bones, it changes everything. You carry yourself differently. You speak more clearly. You choose more intentionally, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you finally stopped betraying yourself. And that kind of integrity can't help but ripple out. People feel it in your presence. They may not know what changed, but they'll notice that you're rooted, that you're clear, that you're grounded in something real. And that's rare because we live in a world addicted to performance, to shortcuts, to appearances. But integrity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply is. The early hours of the morning, before the phones start buzzing, before the noise takes over, are a sacred place to practice being who you say you are. It's a laboratory for your character, a rehearsal space for your courage, a sanctuary where you get to remember that you're not defined by your circumstances, but by your choices. When you build a habit of waking up early, you're not just chasing a routine. You're cultivating a relationship with yourself. You're proving that your word matters, that your time matters, that your future matters. And every day you show up before the world expects anything of you, you're reminding yourself, I am someone who can be trusted. That's what builds momentum, not the checklist, not the hustle, but the quiet consistency of self-trust. So tomorrow, when the alarm rings again, and you feel that tug to stay in bed, remember, it's not just about getting up. It's about rising into your identity, choosing again to be someone who honors their word, someone who doesn't shrink from discomfort, someone who leads from within. Because the world doesn't need more people who chase productivity. It needs more people who live with integrity, and that begins in the dark, when no one is watching and you decide to rise. Waking up at 4 a.m. won't change your life overnight, but it will begin to shape the kind of person who changes their own life day by day, moment by moment. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than you were yesterday. In the stillness of dawn, that's where breakthroughs are born. So tomorrow morning, when your alarm rings, ask yourself, do I want to stay comfortable or do I want to become unstoppable? The choice is always yours.